Welcome to the Mending Piece by Piece podcast, where we dive into the deeply personal journeys of grief, healing, and hope. Each week, we bring you heartfelt conversations with those who have experienced profound loss, offering insights, comfort, and a sense of community. Whether you're navigating your own grief or supporting someone else through theirs, this podcast is here to remind you that you're not alone. Thank you for joining us on this journey of mending piece by piece. Welcome back to Mending Piece by Piece podcast. This is season 2. I'm your host, Linda Falasco, and I thought I would start off with this podcast episode, just kind of being a review of last season, giving a couple updates, and then giving you a preview of what this season will look like, as well as talk about suicide loss, just a summary of it, because September is Suicide Prevention Month, and September 10th is International Suicide Prevention Day. And on that day, I host a Candlelight, and this will be our 23rd year having the Candlelight Vigil in my area, and that's to remember those lost to suicide. And we kind of gather people from the tri-state area, and it varies how big it might be, but it's a time that survivors can come together and remember their loved ones and feel a sense of support and community. And one of the ways that we bring awareness about suicide is having that vigil. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that in this episode as well. If you haven't listened to the first season, I'd suggest listen to it. But the first season was me sharing my story of losing my brother, Jeff, who was 22 to suicide. And that was 30 years ago. And recording that episode, it brought back some things that I kind of forgot about and kind of tucked away. And it resurfaced, and I had to look at those feelings again and think about certain things. But what really surprised me was, as each episode was coming out, or as I was editing the episodes, it just seemed so different. Hearing my story was different. When I talk about my story, I might get emotional, and I realize, oh yeah, I've been through that, or I can feel the feelings. But there was something different about hearing your own voice and hearing your story. And there were episodes that I could not listen to. I started to listen to, and then I was like, I felt it in my stomach, or my heart felt like it was going to stop. And I was like, I can't listen to this. Some of them I went back and I was like, okay, I listened to them in bits, but they were really hard, and I was surprised by that. And I wanted to share that because I want people to understand too that grief is not just like a certain time frame and you're going to be fine in a few months, a few years. It just varies, and it comes in waves. So that was a little surprising to me, is how it brought up some stuff and how hard it was to hear my story. But it was also very therapeutic in a way of I felt like I was able to move through some of the emotions and some of the thoughts that just kind of were stuck. And I felt encouraged by that. I also felt encouraged by getting positive feedback from other people, the listeners, and how it's been helping them. So I hope that this season, when you get to hear from other guests, that you'll continue to benefit and people will feel validated and heard and understood just by hearing other people's stories. So this season, it's going to be a mix of some single episodes, me sharing on different topics of grief, but also we have a mix of various losses. A couple of people will be talking about loss of a child, loss of a spouse, loss of grandparents. And there are different causes of death. So we'll cover cancer, overdose, heart, various losses, various types of death. But one thing that we're going to hear and we're going to see that some of the guests have had in common is multiple losses, some of them in a very short period of time. And I think that a lot of people don't realize the effect of when you have multiple losses in a short time, how that can compound on each other. And I'm going to do a whole podcast, different episode on that, because just listening to people's stories this season, I realized how hard that is, how misunderstood it is, and how when we don't have enough time to deal with, one type of loss and then another one comes really quickly, then it just kind of magnifies. And I understand that. I've been through that. In one period, I had lost my second brother, and then it was 2 years later. So there was a significant amount of time, but in the scheme of things, 2 years wasn't that much. And then I lost my dad, but at the same time, my husband had cardiac arrest, and praise God, they saved his life. But it was the same time that my dad was dying, and I had just found out and was trying to deal with that. My dad passed away soon after. 2 weeks after that, I lost my nephew. And then about 5.5, 6 months after that, I lost my nana. And I was just plummeted with grief and felt like I don't even know how to get myself up. So hearing other people talk about like these multiple losses really made me realize I want to do a whole nother podcast on that and how to cope and how to survive through that, because you can survive through that. Today, though, I want to talk about Suicide Prevention Day, like I said. That's been going on, I'm not sure how many years. I know since I've had the Candlelight, they've had the mental health awareness and then the Suicide Prevention Day, but it switched to September. September 10th every year is International Suicide Prevention Day. And like I said, I host the Candlelight. People do things like all over the country, all over the world on that day. This year's theme is changing the narrative on suicide. And the call to action is start the conversation. And I think that's great, because we do need to change the narrative and we do need to start the conversation about suicide, about mental health. This theme will help raise awareness about the importance of reducing stigma and encouraging open conversations. And that should help prevent suicides. When we're able to be talking about it and feel open and lack a stigma, that really does help people get help. So I want to encourage people out there, start the conversation, start talking about it. Look around. If you know people that are having a hard time, don't be afraid to ask them if they are hurting and have they thought about hurting themselves, if that's something you are suspecting, or have they thought about killing themselves. If you ask somebody, you're not putting that thought into their mind. If they have that thought, they have that thought. That's a myth, and a lot of people misunderstand that and think, oh, I don't want to put something in their mind. You won't do that by asking. And if anybody is in crisis, and in the US, you can dial 988 and you can talk to somebody. That is the crisis support line and the suicide prevention support line, I should say. And people are there. People are there to help you. And if you're supporting somebody who is struggling with their mental health and has been thinking of suicide and you're not sure what to do, you can also call 999. I don't know why I keep saying 988 and talk to somebody, and they'll direct you on what to do. One of the things after losing my brother that I guess became my life's work was helping survivors. And during this month, being suicide awareness, there is a lot of work that I'll do around working with survivors. And losing someone to suicide is very complex and painful, and it's unique. It's different than other types of loss and grief. In addition to the grief that comes with this type of loss, what happens is people might be dealing with other types of feelings. And I'm going to kind of go over some of them, just a summary. I know if you listened to the podcast last season, I went through a lot in detail, but I kind of want to summarize this for people that if you have lost a loved one and you're thinking, I don't know if this is the way I'm supposed to be feeling or not, or what's going on, I just kind of want to give a summary. And then for those out there that might be supporting somebody, that's important to know. So some of the common feelings are shock, guilt, anger, confusion. And yes, you feel that with other types of grief, but with this type of loss, it's magnified. And what also happens, the question why is so common. That is one of the unique features with this type of loss, is why, and wondering, is there or was there something that I could have done, I should have done to prevent this? And that is something unique to survivors that they will wrestle with over and over. And the guilt that comes with it. These are natural feelings and a natural part of the grieving process, but they can be really intense and difficult to manage when suicide is involved. And it's important to understand that you are not to blame for what happened. Coping with the emotions that arise after suicide loss can be incredibly challenging. And I want to talk about some of the common feelings that come with that type of loss and that listeners might be feeling and trying to figure out how to process those feelings. First one, guilt. It's so common to feel guilty after losing someone to suicide, like I mentioned earlier. And you might find yourself replaying events and conversations and wondering, did I miss any signs? Did I hear them say something, or did I miss them telling me something, trying to read in between the lines? You might be wondering, like, was there more I could have done? I always say there's the woulda, coulda, shouldas. And it's important to remind yourself that you did the best you could with what information you had at the time, because a lot of us go back and then we see things in hindsight. And it's really difficult when we do that, because then we put so much on ourselves and start to maybe blame ourselves or feel more guilty that, oh, well, I should have just known that. But you didn't know that. So you have to be kind to yourself and realize that you did the best with what you knew at the time. And mental illness, if it is part of what happened, it's unpredictable. And people could be doing really well, and then all of a sudden they're not doing well. They just kind of crash. And it's really, really hard when we don't know somebody's mental capacity at that moment. And one thing I tell people is that everybody has a part of their brain, like, or a part of them that they keep in their brain that they're not sharing with anybody. And you might think you knew this person up and down, inside out, but there could be that one part that they chose not to share with anybody. And that is something that a lot of survivors like myself have to wrestle with and realize that maybe I didn't know everything. Maybe I didn't understand what was going on because they weren't sharing it with me. Another common emotion is anger. Now, not everybody feels angry, but it's common. People might be angry at their loved one for leaving. They may be angry at themselves and not thinking they didn't do enough and should have prevented it, like I said. They may be angry at the mental health system. They may be angry at other people. Anger could be at all different types of people themselves or whatever. It's not just being angry at your loved one. Many people don't get angry at their loved one. Might be angry at God, maybe angry at the world itself. I know myself, I was angry, and I was angry at everybody else for really minute things that had nothing to do with the loss, but that's how my anger came out. And it's important to find healthy ways to express and work through your anger, whether it's talking with somebody that you trust, journaling, getting help with therapy. With anger, though, I have found you need to find a physical release to it. So I encourage people, like, they can get boxing gloves and like box or hit something like I don't have it here, but like a punching bag in my office. It was one of the ones you just kind of blow up and can go up and down, ripping up paper or breaking things. Not breaking things in your house, but like people have said they'll go out and they'll like break old dishes that they don't need. I think I said ripping things up. Just something physical, really, to help get that anger out. You may feel a lot better after you're doing that. Another common feelings right after the loss are shock and confusion. And that accompanies suicide pretty much all the time. I haven't met anybody who has really said, yeah, I wasn't shocked by it, or I don't feel like I'm in shock. Most people have that shock, and it's really hard to process like what happened. It feels like everything's a blur, and grief fog. I've talked about that. Like you're living in a fog, struggling to make sense of things, make sense of what happened, make sense of your emotions. And it's okay. It's okay not to have all the answers. It's okay that you're feeling this way. This is normal. Give yourself some time to process what's happened. And don't be afraid, again, to talk to someone, to reach out, find support, whether it's a support group or just, calling somebody that you really trust, or seeking professional support. Finding support after suicide loss is really crucial in being able to move through this type of loss. It's very different. Some people do well going to just a general grief group. Others don't, because they feel misunderstood. They feel judged, or that there's stigma there. So each person's different. If you don't like groups, that's fine. Maybe talk to a therapist, a friend, somebody else who can sit with your pain and can hold that for you. Now, not a lot of people can do that, especially this kind of pain, because it is so deep and intense. You don't have to go through this alone. It's important to hear that. There are many resources available to you. Like I said, there's support groups for suicide loss survivors. I attended one for 2 years straight. There's therapy. I'd suggest, if you want to do therapy, make sure the person understands suicide loss. Not every person, or therapist, I should say, that works in grief truly understands suicide loss. So finding someone who understands suicide loss, that is experienced in trauma and possibly EMDR, if you think you need that, would be really beneficial. There's a lot of online communities, like on Facebook, tons of groups that you can find, and they're really helpful. I know I found them helpful. Talking's not for everybody, though. Talking to others who have experienced similar losses can help you feel less isolated and provide you with extra support and tools to cope. But like I said, talking about your loss is not for everybody. Some people may find it in action and doing things and getting involved. So that may be something you do by volunteering. I don't want to say donating your time, but giving your time to something that was meaningful to your loved one. Many people get involved in the organization American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. They have the Out of the Darkness walks. There's local organizations. I know we have a task force in our area. There's lots of other nonprofits that have been started in memory of people who have lost loved ones to suicide. So there's other ways that you can work through and get these feelings out. It doesn't always have to be talking, but I think you need to figure out ways to express your grief. Another thing that is really helpful is honoring your loved one's memory. And with this type of loss, many people have a hard time with that. I have to say, in the 30 years, we've come a long way since I've lost my brother. There are more and more, like I said, organizations that have popped up, but more people doing things to remember and honor those who died by suicide. It can be incredibly healing to find ways to honor, to speak your loved one's name, to keep their legacy alive. Because the one thing that I try to communicate to everyone is that they had a whole life. They didn't just have this one moment. And we need to focus on their life and their legacy and what was great about them. Not just this, not just they died by suicide. So when we're able to honor a loved one and keep their memory alive and talk about them and share memories, this is really healing for so many people. And I know for myself, since season 1 came out this summer, it was 30 years that I lost Jeff in July, and then it was his birthday in August. So the month of July, I decided that I would share a memory a day for 30 days in honor and in memory of him, instead of doing the dreaded, oh my gosh, it's 30 years and this is overwhelming and I feel so bad. I wanted to take it a different way. And it was amazing. It was really powerful for me. And I didn't expect to feel the way I did by doing it. And I just did a video a day of a memory I had of my brother and shared it on TikTok, and didn't care if anyone listened to him. I just wanted to put it out there. But the love that I got back and the feedback and people share memories with me was really great. And some just being able to laugh at some of those memories I forgot about, because a lot of times I'm thinking of, like, just how he passed away or woulda, coulda, shoulda. But this really was good for me. It was good to come up with all these memories of when we were younger and experiences we had together. So sharing their memory, whether it's in, like I did, in a memorial book, online they have things. We have quilts that people do, whether you just light a candle on certain dates, because I do that as well, or participate in walks or suicide prevention efforts in their name. Any way that you feel is honoring your loved one, that's a great way for you to find a sense of purpose and connection to them. And just thinking of that, the connection and sense of purpose, going back to what I said about July and sharing those memories, I really did feel that sense of connection again with my brother by sharing those memories, because I don't have anyone I can sit there, like, I don't have him to be like, oh, remember when we did this, or anyone else in my family to sit and talk about these memories. So sharing those memories did help me feel connected. And I want to encourage you guys to find ways to feel connected to your loved one. And just kind of in closing, wanted to say, like, coping with the loss of a loved one to suicide is one of the most challenging experiences anyone can go through. Yeah, it's one of the most challenges experiences anyone can go through. And I just have to pause on that, because when I said that, it felt just so heavy. Just realizing, like, I can sit here and talk about it and share this stuff with people. And a lot of times that's what we'll do, is we'll just talk and we don't pause and we don't allow ourselves to really feel. But when I said that, I felt that heavy, like almost like I couldn't catch my breath. And again, it's like sometimes when I hear myself, I'm like, huh, that is you. That's your story. That's your life. And I don't know, but just feeling that, I wanted to share that and say to you, this is very challenging. It's okay to feel all these kind of emotions that you're going to feel and that you are feeling. They are normal for this abnormal grief. It's okay to get help. It's okay to talk about it. What it's not okay to do is isolate. Do not isolate. Reach out. You can send me a message. I will listen. You are not alone. You don't have to navigate this journey alone. And if you know someone who is going through this loss, reach out to them. Reach out. Just check in on them. See how they're doing. If you know someone who is struggling with suicidal thoughts, please reach out to a professional. Call 988, like I said, a crisis line, and get them help immediately. Get them help immediately. I do want to share that doing this podcast, my hope is that I can continue to build a community of people who have gone through loss and are going through grief, and where people can feel heard, validated, and will find some hope and find some support. In closing, I just wanted to share a couple exciting things that I have going on, and that is I have the podcast. I have the newsletter, Mending Piece by Piece. If you haven't signed up, I encourage you to sign up. It's a monthly newsletter that has information on different grief topics, or it may, like it was Men's Mental Health Awareness Month, I had information on that. I have a mending moment that's for listeners and readers to send in. I have a question on there to send in their mending moment to whatever the question is of that, that month. Or if it's, hey, this has helped me in my grief, hey, send it in. I want to be able to do shout outs. I want to, through the newsletter, I'm going to have like a memory page, and that could be supported by like sending in a donation to support the podcast. And we're going to have like in memory of if it's their birthday or the anniversary date. So there's things I'm going to be developing as I'm trying to build this Mending Piece by Piece community. We'll have a storefront out soon online where you can get Mending Piece by Piece shirts and different merch. And yeah, I think that's it. So I hope that you found this episode helpful. I hope that it provided some comfort and guidance for those that are going through suicide loss, or those that are supporting those going through that loss. And if you have questions or there's more, I know I just kind of briefly went over it, more information you want to know, you could always reach out to me. My, contact information will be in these notes. And yeah, just continue to listen, share, subscribe. We have some really amazing guests coming up this season that I'm excited to share with you and their story. I know that by hearing their stories, it's going to help many other people out there. Thank you for listening, watching, and supporting Mending Piece by Piece. And I will see you in the next episode. Till then, continue mending piece by piece, one step at a time. Thank you for listening to the Mending Piece by Piece podcast. If you lost a loved one and would like additional grief resource to help navigate you through your grief journey, you could purchase Mending Piece by Piece After Suicide Loss, Guided Grief Workbook and Journal to Heal the Survivor's Heart, or Mending Piece by Piece, a workbook and journal for navigating grief with hope, on both Amazon and Barnes & Noble. And until next time, continue mending piece by piece, healing through grief, one step at a time.